Hello, just hold on for a few moments. There's quite a few people kind of just joining, so I'll just hold on, see if we get any more visitors. So we'll start in just a moment, okay? Okay, hopefully everyone who's going to join us is now with us. So I will just put the main screen up. So hopefully you'll be able to see what I can see. Fingers crossed. This is my first time doing this, so you'll need to hopefully bear with me. This will all go well. So I'll just share this. Okay, so welcome to our introduction to A-level biology. My name is Mrs. Williams. I'm head of biology at JCG. So the students will hopefully all know me well. And for parents who haven't met me yet, I'll be just explaining a little bit tonight about how A-level biology works, how it's assessed, and at the end I'll give you some a chance to ask any questions. Obviously it's unfortunately a bit of a one-way system, so as you probably experienced in other presentations, if you have any questions at any point throughout the presentation, just type them into the chat function, and then once I'm finished, I'll open up the chat function and I will go through any questions that are there and answer hopefully everything that you want to know. Okay, so hopefully your daughter is fully aware of what biology involves. The A-level follows on really nicely from the GCSE. We currently do the IGCSE, which is what your daughter is currently studying to sit her IGCSE biology in the summer. The reason we chose that is because it gives a really, really strong, solid foundation that takes students up to a slightly higher level than the normal GCSE did. So it just gives them that little bit of leg up, a little bit of an advantage, head start into A-level biology. Now, the A-level itself is split into 6 modules. Module 1 actually isn't taught, and I'll explain why that is in a moment. That links more to the practical endorsement. Module 2 to 6 are the taught modules. So those are the ones that actually contain the content of the course and the stuff that they need to learn, all the information, all the theory. The practical endorsement is obviously the practical side of things. We'll be doing assessments all the way through the 2 years, and I will go through that in a little bit more detail as we move through this presentation. So, like I said, module 1 isn't a specifically taught module because it underpins everything. Biology is an incredibly practical subject. We develop practical skills throughout the 2 years, and these are practical skills that universities have informed the A-level exam boards that they really value in students who go off to study any sort of sciences, medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine, more kind of traditional sciences like biology, genetics, those sorts of things. So these are the skills that the students will future study, because they involve lots and lots of different skills, from very fine motor skills where they're working with microscopes and working with very small things, to more gross motor skills where they're doing dissections and being out in the places like the sand dunes doing lots and lots of hands-on research. So that is only assessed for the full A-level, so there isn't a practical component to the Year 12 content, but the practicals that we do in Year 12 will be assessed in the form of exam questions on the end of Year 12 exam. Now, the students will receive a grade for their A-level, pass or fail. We make sure that they pass, obviously, their practical endorsement, and I'll come to what makes a pass in that in a few moments. So module 2 is where we start. So our current Year 12s are in the process of studying this at the moment. This as you can see with the topics that we cover, really underpins everything that they do right the way through the A-level. So they start off with cell structure and biological molecules. A-levels are taught at JCG split between 2 teachers. So one teacher will be teaching students about cell structure, whilst the other teacher is teaching them about biological molecules. These are the 2 really foundation topics, really underpin absolutely everything. And these should all be topics that students are familiar with. So cell structure and biological molecules were topics they encountered in year 9. Nucleotides and nucleic acids we did at the end of year 10. Enzymes, again, they did in year 9. Biological membranes, that's about transport in and out of cells, about the structure of the membrane. Again, they covered that in year 9. Cell diversity and organisation they did in year 9. Cell division is something they still have to cover, which is one of the topics we will do after they've sat their mocks. So that's something that is really fundamental to all of A-level biology. So we do that first, as you can imagine. Once they've finished that, then we get into the more specific topics. So we move on to exchange and transport. So they start off by talking about exchange surfaces. So again, this links to some of the work that they've done in year 10 about the breathing system in humans. We also look at the breathing system in other species like fish, and they get to do, not for a practical assessment, but just for fun, things like fish dissections, look at the gills, really get mucky, get their hands in and have a look at what the differences are between the human and the fish breathing systems. We also look at transporting animals and transporting plants. Now, with these topics, these are obviously anatomy and physiology based topics, yet 10 students cover very similar topics, but in terms of hands-on opportunities, we tend to save that for the A-level students. So where we might do a dissection of the lungs or a dissection of the heart for year 10 students, that would be a demonstration that the students would be watching and listening, and they might get the opportunity, if they really want to put a pair of gloves on at the end and have a feel, but they wouldn't be doing the dissection step by step themselves. Whereas in year 12, we start doing these dissections with the students leading it. And there is actually a practical assessment which involves a heart dissection. Module 4 is the final one that we study in year 12, which is, as you can see, all about disease prevention and the immune system. So that's obviously a really key topic, something that's really high news, really interesting for students at the moment. We talk about biodiversity. That involves quite a lot of practical hands-on work. So we take students out to the sand dunes in St. Wands, and they do some research, taking measurements, doing some field work down in St. Wands. We also look at classification and evolution. So this looks at evolution from a whole organism point of view, but also on a molecular point of view. So we'll be looking at new methods of evolution and classification and how the evidence that we use for those topics has changed over the years as knowledge has developed. So those are the topics that students will do in year 12, and that will be assessed on their year 12 exam. Once they come back after their year 12 exam, they start moving on to the year 13 content. Now, the year 13 is split into 2 modules, which, as you'll notice, are bigger than the modules that they do in year 12. So they last a greater period of time. There's more to remember. So again, these are topics that the students should be really familiar with. Communication and homeostasis, they covered the nerves and hormones in year 10, so that should be familiar. Excretion, they won't have encountered yet, but that's something we'll be doing later on in year 11. Neuronal communication, hormonal communication, plant and animal responses, so we talk about the brain, we talk about plant responses to things like light and gravity. We talk about photosynthesis and respiration. And a lot of this, students often comment in the 6th form that the topics that they have kind of skimmed over in year 9, 10 and 11 are delved into in a greater depth in year 12 and 13. So, for example, respiration is a topic that year 13 are currently studying. In year 10, we cover respiration and we look at it as a very nice simple equation. Students learn that glucose plus oxygen produces carbon dioxide and water. In year 13, that's about half a term's worth of work to see how those reactants become those products. So students often comment that it's really fascinating because they actually get to see the details, and a lot of the questions that they had in GCSE of, well, why, how does that happen and why, by the time we finish the A-level, they've had a lot of those, hopefully most of those, if not all of those questions answered. The final topic is the one that the students really get interested in. This is their favourite one, I would say, out of all of them. The last two sections on that, population sustainability and ecosystems, those two sections are taught at the end of year 12. That involves a lot of practical work, being outside. And as you can imagine, doing that in the summer term, just before the summer holidays, much more pleasant than getting onto that in January or February and going down to the sand dunes in the tipping down rain, freezing to death. Much nicer that we can go down there, do the work, get an ice cream and then enjoy our afternoon. The rest of that topic is, as you can see, all about genetics. Students absolutely love this topic and they really do go away from this inspired in genetics. So they look at cellular control, so how genes can be switched on and switched off to control body plan. We look at inheritance, so where students have looked at the inheritance of one trait in year 11, they look at the inheritance of two at a time, and then we look at the interaction between multiple genes where some genes can overpower the expression of others. And then we look at the technology side of things. So we look at manipulating genomes, so we think about things like genetic engineering. And most interestingly for students this year, I would say, is that we look at the process of PCR, which obviously lots of us have had these PCR tests in the last couple of years to test for COVID. So being able to really find out what's actually happening on a molecular level in order to gain those results. We also have cloning and biotechnology, which again build on some of the work that they do in year 11 to look at the production of cloned animals, cloned plants, and how that can be used in technology, in industry, and for profit, and looking at how that can be beneficial to us. Now, in terms of the practical endorsement, this is, as I said, completely separate to the A-level. They can achieve an A-level in biology and not get the practical endorsement. Obviously, that's not what we want for our students, because having the practical endorsement is a really well recognised addition to the A-level. These are teacher assessed, so we embed these practicals into our schemes of work, into our teaching plans. So when students are doing theory that links to these practicals, we then follow that up with a practical. So that gets students thinking about how the practical and the theory link, but it also lets them think about what sort of questions they might be asked in an exam, as well as gaining those practical skills. So these are the sorts of practicals they'll be required to do. So it builds from the bottom of the triangle there with a very basic kind of core skills that we expect biologists to have, being able to look down microscopes and draw things that they see, dissections, enzyme reactions, some new equipment, colorimeters that students won't have had an opportunity to use at GCSE, so they get to use new technology, new equipment. Then we look at more specific techniques, so things like chromatography. Electrophoresis is the process by which we would do genetic fingerprinting or DNA fingerprinting. So they get to have the opportunity to have a go at that themselves. We do some microbiology, grow some bacteria. We look at some transport in and out of cells, so those will be fairly familiar to students with osmosis experiments. And then we do qualitative testing, which is essentially the food tests that they did in year 9, but going into those in more detail. We then build on that with some investigative work. So we'll look at some computer modelling, where we have a special programme which involves being able to model some DNA and take measurements of the structure of DNA. And that's all done on the computer, so that's using computer technology for biology. And then we look at plant and animal responses. We split that between two different activities. Sometimes we do some work with some water fleas, where students are looking down the microscope and looking at how they respond to different stimuli. Sometimes I get them running around outside and they can use themselves as their sample and look at how things like exercise affect heart rate. The one at the top there is the one that they all kind of dread, but then when they get into it, they really enjoy. This is kind of like a mini dissertation. So any of you who were at university will probably remember with fond feelings your dissertation time. Now, this is a mini dissertation, so it's not quite as long, but what it is an opportunity to carry out a full investigation, right the way from researching your question, researching your theory, taking that through to carrying out the investigation, analysing the results and evaluating your skills and how you the method, how you've carried that out. We also expect students to learn how to do proper referencing, so we use Harvard referencing, which is a great opportunity for them to get ahead of the game in terms of the requirements that they'll have at university. The assessment, this is what we do in year 12, so this is our internal exam, so it's split into 2 exam papers that they will sit in around May of year 12. These reflect the AS exam, so we use secure AS papers, so these are exam board structured papers, and they last about an hour and a half, and each paper is 50% of their year 12 grade, which will help us to inform our UCAS predictions that get sent off to the university. So these are really important exams. The first exam is a breadth paper, so this goes into more topics, but not quite as much detail, whereas the second paper is a depth, which has fewer questions, but the questions themselves are extended response, so they require far more detail and depth of knowledge. The full A-level, the one that they're actually sitting as the external exam, is split into 3 papers. Now, this is not split by type of question, this is split by topic. So the first paper is biological processes, which looks at things like the respiration topic, looks at all the biochemistry, it looks at the neuronal communication, all of those sorts of sections. And then the second paper is the biological diversity. So this is the ecosystems and the genetics, essentially. Now, the foundation topics in year 12, some of those, particularly the biological diversity, they underpin everything. So, sorry, the biological foundations. So they can be encountered, those topics can be encountered in either of those 2 papers. They then have the dreaded unified biology paper, which can ask them questions about anything else that they've encountered. And then, like I say, the exam component is the grade, and then the non-exam component is the practical endorsement, which is reported separately. Now, why choose A-level biology? Now, obviously, if your students are wanting to go off to do medicine or midwifery or nursing or any sort of healthcare or scientific field, it's a fantastic start to that, where they're able to build those skills. It also is an incredibly well thought of A-level, so for students who are wanting to go off and do other subjects, having some scientific skills on their UCAS form or on their CV is really, really well looked at, and will give them that little bit of a head start over people who haven't maybe got that breadth of their application. It also complements really well some of the other subjects, such as sport, chemistry and psychology. We have absolutely outstanding exam results, so even in this very unusual time, our A-level results have massively exceeded the national results there. So our A to A star rate last year, the current the year 13s who finished their exams in 2021 this year, they had 61% A star to A. Now, obviously, that is a bit higher because we don't have any silly mistakes being made when it's more continuous assessment. However, our results are always significantly higher than the national average. We also have the opportunity to do lots of field work. So, like I say, we go down to St. Juan's. There are often other opportunities. We've taken students to the zoo on numerous occasions. We've taken students off to industrial places. So we went to the Jersey Dairy at one point to have a look at their biotechnology equipment. And we will always look for opportunities to get students out of school and learning about the topics that they're doing, but in a real life situation. We'll also have our famous expedition, which is very well known to the students. We go to some amazing places around the world. It's a really interesting subject. It's so relevant and important to the life that we're living at the moment and the world that students are living in, not just in terms of infection and COVID pandemics, but also in terms of human influences on the environment, global warming, global change, all of those sorts of things that we are looking at things like sustainability right the way through the course. So this is really relevant, and students do tend to find that it's a subject that they really get involved in and become inspired, hopefully, to go on and study further. It isn't easy, it is a challenge. Students do notice the jump up from GCSE, but we provide students with a lot of support. We have clinics at lunchtime and after school, we have drop-ins, and our teachers are always more than happy to give the extra support to any students who are finding things difficult. Entry requirements are pretty standard across JCG, so we need students to get a 6 in GCSE biology or a 6.6 or above in double science. There is not a significant amount, but a reasonable amount of maths. In biology, we do provide a maths for biologists elective, which students are expected to take, where we give them a bit more support on those specific maths skills. But we do expect students to have achieved a grade 6 in maths to allow them to access those difficult questions. Obviously, they should be interested in biology and they should have good independent learning skills. That kind of goes for whatever A levels they are choosing. Now, just very briefly before I go to some questions, just to give you a little bit of an idea of the sort of expeditions that we've done in the past. The last one we did pre-COVID was South Africa. As you can see, students get involved in the local community, they get to help out in schools, they get to meet with the local people and really build some lovely relationships there. They get to do sampling techniques, so they go off with actual scientists and learn hands-on research skills, and actually their research, their data that they are collecting is going to be used by the scientists who take it back to their universities and use that for data analysis. Some of our students a few years ago, when we went to Dominica, were involved with an entomologist who was studying the insect life in the area, and our JCG girls were part of discovering 3 new species to science. We didn't know those existed, and there is now a plaque in the Natural History Museum with Jersey College for Girls written on, because we were part of that amazing scientific discovery. We also do a dive week, which these are all photos taken by Ms. Paddy Dahl in South Africa on her dive camps. These are the sorts of things students get to see. Absolutely amazing experience. For any of you that haven't dived before, you will absolutely love it if you end up coming on one of these trips. We do have an